showing you is just an overall map of the main battles of the U.S. Civil War. Okay, and if you notice, there were only two major battles that took place in the North. That would be Bull Run, okay, not Bull Run, sorry, Antietam, which is in Maryland, and then Gettysburg. Those are the only two battles where the South was on the offensive, okay. So there's that, okay. And remember, there's also two types of theaters. You have the Eastern Theater, which is near the capitals of Richmond, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. You also have the Western Front, which is near what? Mississippi River, okay? And remember, the Union, one of their plans is called the Anaconda Plan, which is you're going to blockade the southern ports. And then step 2 is you get control of the entire Mississippi River, so then you can split the Confederacy in half. Okay? Let's see, people who are online, can y'all hear me? Okay, thank you. All right, so with our notes, okay, we are battles 1861, okay? We're first going to focus, there's really only one battle that you have to know for 1861, and that's going to be Bull Run, also known as First Bull Run because there will be a second one later. Y'all know that different sides called it different things. One called it after a body of water. One would call it after like the actual settlement, the town. Okay, most people refer to it as Bull Run though. Bull Run is about 25 miles away from Washington, D.C. So that is super, 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 super close to the U.S. Capitol. Okay, it happened in July of 1861, and this is considered the first real battle. Remember, Fort Sumter was just an outbreak. This is the first real battle, okay? The guy who's in charge for the Union at this time, in terms of general military, it'll be McDowell. And remember, what do you call the Union Army? The Army of the Potomac. Remember, that's the river, Potomac. And then you have PGT Beauregard, who is the CSA like general at this time, while they're trying to find what Lee's going to do, okay? And he's also the one who bombarded Fort Sumter at the outbreak of the Civil War, okay? Two reasons why this battle is important. One, it's the first real battle. Two, is that this ends this theory that the Union is just going to annihilate the CSA early on, nip it in the bud kind of thing, and this war will be over, this 90-day war. That was a theory, okay? But because this did not go as planned, it lets the Union know this war is going to be a lot longer than 90 days, okay? So, couple things, what's going to happen here is you have McDowell for the Union, okay? And remember, this is the Union attacking the South. This is Virginia. Bull Run's in Virginia, okay? And the Union is trying to break through, I guess you could say, the defensive line of the Confederacy, okay? And who is that defensive genius of the Confederacy? Stonewall Jackson, hence his name, Stonewall. Can't break through them, okay? And they had a different thing where some people are like down here, some people are up here, and like the Union cannot break through the defensive line of the Confederacy, led by Stonewall Jackson, that defensive line, okay? And what's going to happen is after hours of the Union trying to break through, there will be an order to do what is called the rebel yell, which would freak a lot of people out if you never heard it before. It's like you have this like high-pitched voice where like you're like, I mean,
Oh,
hello? Yes?
office checkout.
Who?
Quickly go over.
Okay, thank you. All right, just we'll watch this and we'll be good. Okay, but what's going to happen is the Confederacy will start yelling this high-pitched voice and like moving their tongue, so it's like, like that, okay? And can you imagine for hours the Union's trying to break through, and all of a sudden the Confederacy just charges the Union doing the rebel yell. And what's going to happen is the Union like, what the heck's going on? They run away, okay? And so it basically, you could say that the Union did the attacking, but the Union was not successful at First Bull Run. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to show you. So what's going to happen to McDowell, though? McDowell will be one of the first generals replaced. Remember, I told you, Lincoln's going to be very hands-on. He's a big micromanager, and he has that telegraph, so he can do instant communication, basically. Okay? And he's going to fire McDowell and replace him with a guy named George McClellan. Okay? George McClellan is a Democrat. Okay? He is a perfectionist. And y'all know sometimes people who are perfectionists, they will be hesitant to do certain things because they want to make sure it's perfect. Okay? And what that means is he never took risk. That's the blank there. Okay? He is the type, he told Lincoln, you know, we can't fight yet because I need at least 3 months of training for my soldiers. And like during the training, well, we need these weapons. I can't train yet. And then like he kept on coming up with excuses according to Lincoln. Okay. But what it was is McClellan was just overly hesitant because he's a perfectionist. Okay. But as commander in chief, Lincoln's like, fight. You're a general. Fight. Okay. And so he was constantly disappointed in angry and frustrated at McClellan because, again, McClellan just gave excuses, according to Lincoln. And he actually referred to George McClellan as he has the slows, okay? Like, people actually referred to him as, like, tardy George because he was just overly hesitant, okay? And, again, he's like, oh, I need more troops. So then Lincoln's like, okay, here's more troops. Well, now I need to train the troops. Okay, well, now it's been a couple of months. Well, now we need this new, you know. It's like, just fight, okay, is what I want you to do, okay? All right, so I'm going to show you just a couple-minute clip of First Bull Run. It's from a movie called Gods and Generals, okay? I do want to point out, you'll see a group of, like, people who look, they're wearing, like, red and black. They almost look like Moroccan, okay? They're called, like, the Zouaves, but they are, like, North African French descent who will, they're like mercenaries, and they actually will fight on both sides of the Civil War. You'll see them. You're like, that they don't really mix in. You'll see. They're mercenaries from North Africa that have French descent. Okay, so we'll watch this.
Why not go to school where remote learning can be as remote as you want? Like a Verbo.
Looks like next up is Scout.
Hey, I'm here. So these are some plants I found hiking. Some wildflowers. Here we have a pine cone. And then, I don't quite remember what this is. Wait, don't stop!
Fix bayonets. Instruct the men to lay down, hold the ground. Lie down, man. There it is. First rank, lie down. Second rank, kneel. Yeah, coming, boys. Wait till they get close before you shoot. Easy, man. We have no orders to advance. Steady, man. Steady! Damn it.
It's Cummins, boys. What are they doing?
Easy, Mcclellan, easy. Good to have your dander up, but it's discipline wins the day.
Okay, so remember I told you is that McDowell will be replaced by McClellan. McClellan will then start something called the Peninsula Campaign, which is Virginia. Remember Yorktown, Virginia is part of a peninsula, okay? And this is where the training, the hesitant, all that kind of stuff, and he will retreat. So the Peninsula Campaign was not successful early on. And so what's going to happen is McClellan will be fired by Lincoln, who will be replaced by a guy named Pope. Okay, Pope. All right, so now we're going to focus on 1862. Okay, first what we're going to do though is we're going to go to we're going to do the Western Theater. Okay, the Western Theater, that's near the Mississippi River. Okay, and who's in charge? Technically, the Army of the Potomac had an internal group called the Army of the West, and that's like the Western Front, the Mississippi River. Okay, Grant will be in charge of that. Okay, and first good battle for the Union will be the Battle of Shiloh, which is in Tennessee. Remember, Tennessee is part of that Western Theater. So that's the first like big win for, it gives them encouragement because Shiloh is going to be pretty close to the Mississippi River. Okay, and then that will give them encouragement to go after New Orleans. Okay, and so in 1862, with the help of Union Admiral David Farragut and his flotilla, his group of ships, the New Orleans will fall to the Union. Okay, so the reason why that's important is now the Union has some degree of control of a part of the river. The second part of the Anaconda Plan has now started, okay? It has not been achieved yet. That won't happen until 1863, okay? But that's why New Orleans is important, because that Mississippi River has some control by the Union, okay? Now let's go to the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front, there is the Second Battle of Bull Run. This is where Pope, remember I told you about how McClellan's fired and Pope replaces him. Basically, Lee has a trap and like lures Pope and the Union Army back to Manassas or Second Bull Run, same place. And they realize that it's a trap, and so Pope retreats back to D.C. And what does Lincoln do? He replaces Pope with McClellan. So now McClellan has a second chance. But do you see just right there in the first year, do you see who had the better generals? The South did. The Union, can't be as strong if they're constantly being replaced. Okay. All right. So it's for Lee, what is the name of the Confederate Army? The Army of Northern Virginia. Okay. So because Pope goes back to D.C., remember, Bull Run is 25 miles away from D.C. That is when Lincoln's like, okay, let's try McClellan again. Okay. So now, if I were you, please, 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 please put a star next to Antietam. Okay. The Battle of Antietam, also known as the Battle of Sharksburg. One reason why this is important, it's the first battle where the South invades the Union. There's only 2 battles where this happens. This is the first. This is going to be September of 1862. Okay, and again, it's basically Lee versus George McClellan. Okay, Lee really wants to just throw a curveball to the Union by invading it, like hurting their morale. Okay, they also know that they're actually really close to getting the English with Queen Victoria, getting the English to recognize the CSA as existing, and thus would form an alliance. They were really close to getting that. And they said, if we show some courage and then invade the North and we're successful, that would seal the deal, kind of like Saratoga with the American Revolution. Okay, well, here's the problem. Y'all know when, especially during this time with battle plans, you'd have a piece of paper, and sometimes you'd have carrier pigeons. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, they actually had their little plays, if you will, okay, of the strategy, the Lee's men, okay, on paper, and they would roll the paper into a cigar. So, if something happened, oh, it's a cigar, but if you actually unrolled it, it was the battle plans, okay? Someone, we don't know who, but someone in the Confederacy accidentally dropped a cigar with the battle plans. So you see, McClellan had a heads up. He knew what Lee was going to do, okay? So what happens with this actual battle is that Lee invades Maryland at Antietam, okay? And it's bad for Lee, but what he does, instead of surrendering, he retreats back into this, the CSA, back into Virginia, okay? McClellan is overly hesitant because he's a perfectionist. Does McClellan pursue him and end it? No, he's like, we don't have enough troops to go into the South. I'm gonna just stay here. So basically, a lot of people believe the war would have been over right then and there if McClellan had pursued Lee. But instead, Lee retreated safe into the CSA. Okay, so it kind of was like a draw. Now, Antietam, in terms of all U.S. history, it's kind of important. They had between 22 and 24,000 casualties, so killed in action or wounded. Okay, and that is the most American casualties in a single day in U.S. history. Okay, was it the bloodiest battle of the Civil War? No. The bloodiest will be Gettysburg, and that's 3 days. We're talking in all of U.S. history, in 1 day battle, that's Antietam, around 24,000 casualties. It's the bloodiest single day battle. So it's the single bloodiest day of the war, not the bloodiest battle though. Okay, now what McClellan does, y'all know sometimes you might tell your parents not the whole truth, and then when they find out, they're like, well, I didn't lie to you, okay? McClellan told Lincoln, because, Lincoln's in the telegram room waiting to find out what happened. McClellan says, oh, it was a U.S. victory. Well, what did he fail to include? That the South retreated and he did not follow them, okay? So Lincoln has been waiting to issue something really, really bold, okay? And when he hears about this victory of the South trying to invade the Union and it failed miserably according to McClellan, he's like, ooh, I got the courage now. I'm going to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation after hearing of this bold win. Okay, any questions? So what's going to happen when Lincoln finds out, after he's issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which was not a speech, it was a document, okay? He finds out that McClellan did not tell him that it was really a draw and the South ran away and the Union did not pursue. What will Lincoln finally do? Fire McClellan. And that is a very awkward photo because y'all know back then you had to pose. But the reason why people didn't smile in photos back then is because you had to stay in the same position for hours. And if you smiled, it might change the exposure to be blurry. This is Lincoln firing McClellan. Very awkward photo, but I guess they wanted, proof. Okay. So we also talked about the Western Theater already. Remember, the Army of the West, Grant is in charge. Who's second in command? William Sherman. Okay, we talked about the Battle of Shiloh, which is in Tennessee. It kind of opens the door for getting really close to the Mississippi River. You have the capture of New Orleans, which is the first time the Union has some part of the Mississippi River. Okay. Confederate resistance. Want to point out, y'all know part of that Anaconda Plan is a Southern blockade. Okay, the South could never break the blockade. You might have some blockade runners like Rhett Butler in Hollywood. There might be little ships that could sneak through the blockade, but like they never could permanently actually break the blockade, which is going to really financially hurt the South. Okay. Also want to point out that the English, they did not give the Confederacy these ships. Like the Confederacy ordered it from the English, but the British built 2 ships, the Alabama and the Florida. Okay, and like I said, the CSA purchased them. Okay, and like because of that transaction, the Union's really worried that there might be like an eventual English CSA alliance. Okay, so what's going to happen is that there is a British ship called the Trent. Okay, and they pick up some CSA diplomats like John Slidell. Remember him? He was the guy who was snubbed trying to purchase Mexico before the Mexican-American War. Okay, and the Trent is a British ship that has CSA diplomats, and it's supposedly headed to England and France. Okay, the Confederacy or the Union is freaking out because they're on that ship and they're going to be going to basically sign a treaty that would form an alliance. And so the Union people will hijack that Trent ship and hold those diplomats prisoner, basically. Lincoln finds out about this and he's like, you better free those diplomats, because think about it. If he allowed the USA to hold those diplomats captive, the English are like, they were supposed to come to England. You hijacked them. Now we are definitely going to help out England or help out the CSA. So he had them released to like avoid tension and an alliance. Okay. So let's see. Also at the very top, there is the Merrimac versus the Monitor. The reason why we're going to talk about this, I told you this, the South could never permanently break through the blockade. This, though, is the closest the CSA got to breaking the blockade. Okay. Prior to the Civil War, there was a ironclad battleship called the Merrimac. It was called the USS Merrimac. But once the CSA controls it, okay, they're going to call it the CSS Virginia. Okay, and so really it's the Virginia versus the Monitor. The Monitor is the American ship. Okay, and it's going to be a 5-hour duel, a 5-hour battle. Okay, and eventually the CSA, the Virginia or the Merrimac, they're going to retreat. But it was the closest the South got to breaking the Union blockade. Okay, if that had happened, it would have been a lot better for the South, but it did not happen. Okay, so now let's talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, I told you how he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation prior to Antietam. He actually wrote it July of 1862, a couple months before Antietam, but he was waiting for a bold win to issue it because this is a very bold statement. Okay, it freed the slaves in states that were in rebellion. He said that slaves that are in the states that are in rebellion are forever free. Okay, now think about that. That is the same thing as like the government in China saying if you are an American and you're under 20, you could not have a cell phone. What would y'all say to that? Who does China think they are, right? Okay, same thing. When Lincoln says, hey, Southern slaves, you're forever free. Is that Georgia slave owner going to say, yes, Lincoln? No, they're going to say, Lincoln, you're not my president. Jefferson Davis is my president. Okay. What he did do, though, this is where he struggled. He did not free the slaves in the border states. Why did he choose not to free the slaves in the border states? Yeah, if he said that those border states could not have slaves, they would have seceded. It was all about preserving the Union. Okay, and so here's this, I like this quote. Lincoln freed the slaves where he couldn't, the South, and wouldn't free the slaves where he could, the border states, to prevent secession. Okay, this is why it's super important. The Union will now gain the support of England. Now, I will say this, England did not form an alliance with either side, okay? But what this means is that England got rid of slavery a couple years before this, okay? The Emancipation Proclamation, we know that it was a war about secession. It also, the Emancipation Proclamation now makes this war also about slavery. Y'all remember that resolution we talked about yesterday, and Congress said it's just about secession, okay? 1863, January 1st, 1863, that's when it's really published, okay? That is when it says the Civil War is not just about secession, it's about slavery, okay? England got rid of slavery a few years prior, okay? And they realize now that since America said they don't want to have slavery, they realize if we choose to help the CSA, we're promoting slavery. So because of the Emancipation Proclamation, it prevents the English from forming an alliance with England. Okay, so again, the Emancipation Proclamation changed the focus from a war against secession to a war also against slavery. Okay, it also restated the Confiscation Act. Y'all know confiscation, you know, that's like if you're on your cell phone, I can confiscate it. Okay, it said that if you're in rebellion, the area in rebellion, so the CSA, that the Union can confiscate any type of property. Okay, it did not really free the slaves. What will that be? The 13th Amendment. That's the blank there. That will not be ratified until 1865, December 1865. Lincoln's dead by then. Okay, so just note, did Lincoln free the slaves? No. He freed the slaves where he couldn't and wouldn't free the slaves where he could. That's what Lincoln did. Okay, the 13th Amendment is what freed the slaves, and it will not be ratified until December of 1865, way after the death of Lincoln and the Civil War. Okay, also though, this will really encourage about 25% of all the African-American soldiers in the Civil War for the North. About 25% of them were fugitive slaves who, after hearing about the Emancipation Proclamation, escaped slavery, went to the North, and enlisted in the Union Army, because now they know the Union Army is against slavery, and they want to do their part to help fight against slavery now too. Okay? Any questions? So what you're going to do now, it's going to be an individual assignment. It's pretty easy. Okay, you're looking at 3 countries' involvement in the Civil War: France, Russia, England. Okay, it's an individual assignment. Oh, cotton diplomacy. Let me see. Did I skip something? Cotton diplomacy.
Yeah, I think that's one.
Oh, okay. So, sorry about that. So, cotton diplomacy. We know that the CSA really focused on saying, hey, we know England's going to help us and want to break the blockade because they want our affordable cotton. Prime cotton, affordable price. What's going to happen? England doesn't want to risk breaking the blockade. And instead of being, you know, a dependent on Southern cotton, they will look at other places. India cotton, or Indian cotton, and Egyptian cotton. So India and Egypt. So cotton diplomacy will fail because if England can't get it because of the blockade, they'll just find another place, Egypt and India. Okay? Okay. So I bet you'll be able to finish in just a little bit, but just let's finish up a little bit of lecture today, and then the time will be for y'all. Okay, so we finished 1 page of notes, and okay, so now we're going to go to, don't worry about what it says from confiscation to emancipation. Okay, we're going to focus on Black soldiers. So I want to point out that 10% of the entire Union Army were black soldiers, okay? And of all that 10% of all the black soldiers in the Union, 25% of them were those who ran away after the Emancipation Proclamation and enlisted in the North, okay? So do want to point out that black soldiers could fight in the Union Army. However, they were in segregated troops, okay? How it would work is the regular troops would be all black, and then the colonel or whoever is in charge of the all black troops would be a white person, okay? Make sure you know at least one example of this, okay? It's the Massachusetts 54th Infantry, led by Colonel Robert Shaw, S-H-A-W. So Robert Shaw is the white man, and then the 54th Infantry, the troops, are all black, okay? The white troops in the Union got paid $13 a month. The black troops in the Union got paid $10 a month. So again, they're segregated troops, and the black soldiers are getting paid $3 less a month because of their race, okay? And what tended to happen is the all black regiments tended to be assigned the more risky missions. For instance, the 54th Infantry basically was assigned what we call now a suicide mission to attack Fort Wagner, South Carolina, and they will all be killed, okay? But what people will say, so about 200,000 African Americans will fight in the Union Army, okay? Of that, 37,000 will die, and they're called, like, what we talk about, like the African Americans who are fighting in the Union, you know, to end the Civil War and end slavery. They're referred to as the Army of Freedom, because again, they got involved to make it easier for slavery to be abolished. Any questions there? Shaw, S-H-A-W, is that what it is? Or do you have any blanks? Oh, okay. Oh, Army of Freedom. Okay. Next, we have some turning points. Okay. Want to point out the turning points both happened in 1863, and they both happened the first week of July in 1863. So this is going to be a really bad week for the CSA. Okay. And what's interesting, but also can be confusing, is that both turning points end with Berg. You have Vicksburg and Gettysburg. Okay. I'm first going to talk about, I'm actually going to go to the back for Vicksburg first, since technically that battle started earlier. Okay. The Battle of Vicksburg is the Western Theater. Okay. And for 6 weeks, remember, Grant is in charge. Grant attacks or laid siege on this town, Vicksburg, Mississippi. Okay. After 6 weeks of fighting, Vicksburg, Mississippi falls to the Union. The reason why this is important is now the Anaconda Plan is complete. It started with the Battle of New Orleans in 1862, and on July 4th, 1863, the entire Mississippi River is controlled by the Union, and thus the Confederacy is split in half. Okay, that's why it's the turning point. The Western Front basically is no more. And what's going to happen is Grant will get promoted to go be the head general on the Eastern Front now. And that means who's going to, like, hold down the fort in the Western Front? Sherman. That's why it's called Sherman's March to the Sea and not Grant's March to the Sea. Okay, and what is interesting about Vicksburg is the town of Vicksburg made it a law, and it lasted for 80 years. It was illegal to celebrate July 4th. You know, for us, it's like, oh, that's the day where we, you know, declare our independence. Okay, but for Vicksburg, Mississippi, this is the day that the U.S. government conquered them. And so it wasn't until after World War II when they made a law that said it is legal to, we now can, but that'll be for 80 years after 1863 is when they start to say, hey, you can celebrate the 4th of July again. Okay. And again, Lincoln's like, ooh, he actually fights, unlike McClellan. Let's appoint, Grant to be the head honcho and move him to the Army of the Potomac. Okay. All right. Now let's go back to Gettysburg. Okay. Gettysburg is a 3-day battle. It is the bloodiest battle. And it will take place basically. The last day of Gettysburg is the day before Vicksburg falls. If it kind of gives you what's happening at the St. See why it's a really bad week for the Confederacy. Gettysburg is in Pennsylvania. It's the second and last time the CSA invades the North. Okay. Basically, some pre-context here. A couple months before July, there is the Battle of Chancellorsville, okay, which was a Confederate victory. However, though, it will do more harm for the Confederacy. Why? Thomas Stonewall Jackson will be shot in a friendly fire. There was a miscommunication. From that, his left arm, where the bullet was, will be amputated. And in Chancellorsville, there is a tombstone for his left arm. It says, here lies Stonewall Jackson's left arm, okay? From that amputation, there'll be an infection, which would lead to pneumonia. He will die of pneumonia, okay? And that will really be a low blow to the morale of the Confederate Army. And it was supposedly said that Lee said, Thomas, meaning Stonewall, lost his left arm. I've lost my right arm, okay? All right, we'll stop there. You'll have a great rest of y'all's day.